There is a man sitting beneath a tree. The night is ending. Dawn approaches in soft violet waves across the eastern sky. For 49 days he has sat here, unmoving through storms and heat, through the whispers of fear and the seductions of comfort. His body is thin, his eyes are closed. But something in the quality of his stillness suggests he is not absent. He is more present than he has ever been. Around him the world continues its ancient rhythms. Birds begin their morning songs. Dew forms on grass blades. A river flows nearby, indifferent to human longing, indifferent to human pain. And then, in a single moment that will echo through 26 centuries, something shifts. The man opens his eyes. What he sees is not different from what was there before: the same trees, the same sky, the same earth, but everything has changed. He sees the nature of suffering. He sees its origin. He sees its cessation. He sees the path that leads to freedom. This man will come to be called the Buddha, the awakened one. But in this moment, he is simply a human being who has discovered something extraordinary about the nature of existence itself. What he discovered that morning is not a belief system to adopt or a god to worship. It is a map of human consciousness, a precise diagnosis of why we suffer, and a practical method for the end of suffering. It is both utterly simple and endlessly deep. For the next 45 years, he will walk the dusty roads of northern India, teaching anyone who asks, kings and servants, priests and outcasts, men and women, the educated and the illiterate. To each, he offers the same gift: look clearly at your experience. Understand the patterns that bind you. Practice the path that liberates. His teachings spread across Asia and, eventually, across the world. They adapt to cultures, languages, climates, and centuries. But at their core, they remain unchanged, a set of insights into the mechanics of suffering and the possibility of freedom. Tonight, as you rest, we will walk through the entirety of these teachings, not as dry philosophy, but as living wisdom, not as ancient history, but as a mirror held up to your own mind. Because what the Buddha discovered under that tree is as true now as it was then. The patterns he identified still operate in every human heart. The path he outlined still leads where it has always led. This is not a story about religion. It is a story about awakening. And it begins not with answers, but with a question the Buddha never stopped asking. What is the nature of this suffering we carry, and is there a way to be free? Before he was the Buddha, he was Siddhartha. Born in the 5th century BCE in what is now Nepal, near the border with India, he entered the world as a prince. His father, Suddhodana, was the ruler of the Shakya clan. His mother, Queen Maya, died 7 days after his birth, leaving the infant to be raised by her sister. The circumstances of his birth were cushioned by every luxury the ancient world could provide: silk and gold, servants and palaces, 3 homes for 3 seasons, designed to shield him from discomfort. His father had consulted seers at his son's birth, and they had offered a troubling prophecy. This child would become either a great king or a great spiritual teacher. The deciding factor would be exposure to suffering. Suddhodana, ambitious for dynasty and legacy, made a choice. He would ensure his son never witnessed suffering. And so Siddhartha grew up in a gilded cage. He was trained in the arts of war and statecraft. He married a beautiful woman named Yasodhara. He had a son, Rahula. He lived surrounded by music, poetry, dance, and pleasure. The palace grounds were meticulously maintained. The old, the sick, the dying, anyone who might trouble the prince's serene existence were kept far from sight. But you cannot wall out reality forever. One day, against his father's wishes, Siddhartha ventured beyond the palace gates. What he encountered on that journey shattered the carefully constructed illusion of his life. First, he saw an old man, bent and trembling. Then, a person ravaged by illness, body wasting, face contorted. Then, a corpse being carried to the cremation grounds. His charioteer explained what these things were: age, sickness, death, the universal fate of all beings, including princes, including everyone he loved. The young man returned to the palace, but he could not return to innocence. The question had been planted. If all of this youth, health, pleasure, safety is temporary, what is the point? If everyone I love will age, sicken, and die, including myself, what am I doing with this brief existence? The luxury around him began to feel like a mockery. The music sounded hollow. The laughter of the court seemed like whistling in the dark. On one final journey beyond the walls, he encountered a wandering ascetic, a renunciant who had left home in search of liberation from the cycle of suffering. The man's face held a quality Siddhartha had never seen in the palace: peace. Not the peace of ignorance or distraction, but the peace of someone who had looked directly at the hardest truths and found a way through. That night, Siddhartha made a decision that would alter history. He kissed his sleeping wife and infant son. He took one last look at the life that had been prepared for him. And then, at the age of 29, he walked out of the palace and into the forest, trading his royal robes for the simple cloth of a seeker. This moment is called the Great Renunciation. But what he renounced was not pleasure itself. It was the delusion that pleasure could answer the deepest questions of existence. He renounced comfort as a strategy for avoiding truth, and he set out to find what lies on the other side of that avoidance. The forest is dark and full of sounds. Siddhartha walks alone, his feet bare, his head newly shaved. He has left behind his name, his title, his family, his future. He carries nothing. He knows no one. For the first time in his life, he is completely free and completely unprotected. The ascetic path in ancient India was well established. Thousands of seekers roamed the forests and mountains, practicing extreme disciplines in pursuit of liberation. They believed the body was a prison, a source of craving and delusion. To transcend suffering, they thought, one must transcend the body through fasting, through pain, through the systematic denial of every physical need. Siddhartha found teachers. The first was Alara Kalama, a master of meditation who taught him to enter deep states of absorption, realms of consciousness where the noise of the mind fell away into profound stillness. Siddhartha mastered these states quickly, but when he returned from them, the old questions remained. The suffering was still there, waiting. The second teacher was Uddaka Ramaputta, who guided him into even subtler dimensions of awareness. Again, Siddhartha excelled. Again, he found that these states, however exalted, were temporary. They did not uproot the problem, they only postponed it. And so he left his teachers and joined a group of 5 ascetics who practiced the most extreme forms of self-mortification. For 6 years, Siddhartha pushed his body to the edge of death. He ate a single grain of rice per day, then none. His ribs showed through his skin like the beams of a ruined house. His eyes sank into his skull, his hair fell out. He sat in the blazing Sunday. He slept on beds of thorns. He held his breath until he fainted. He became a skeleton wrapped in skin, a living ghost. His 5 companions revered him as the ultimate renunciant, the one who would achieve enlightenment through sheer will and discipline. But inside, Siddhartha was coming to a devastating realization. This isn't working. The body was weak, yes. The mind was focused, yes. But the fundamental problem, the craving, The clinging, the sense of self that generated suffering, remained untouched. He had traded the palace's indulgence for the forest's punishment, but both were forms of the same delusion, the belief that manipulating external conditions could solve an internal problem. One day, near death from starvation, Siddhartha heard a music teacher on a passing boat explaining to his student, "If you tune the string too tight, it will break. If you tune it too loose, it will not play. The perfect sound comes from the middle way." The words struck him like lightning. He had lived at both extremes, indulgence and denial, and neither had brought him closer to the truth. What if liberation required neither extreme? What if the path was something else entirely? That day, he accepted a bowl of rice milk from a village woman named Sujata. His 5 companions, watching him eat, were disgusted. They believed he had given up, abandoned the path, fallen back into weakness. They left him in contempt. But Siddhartha had not given up. He had, for the first time, truly begun. He walks to a river. He bathes, washing away 6 years of dust and denial. His body is frail, but no longer dying. His mind is clear in a way it has never been, not with the forced clarity of starvation, but with the natural clarity of something realigned. He walks until he finds a large fig tree near the village of Bodhi. The tree is ancient, its branches spreading wide, its roots deep. Something about this place feels right. He sits. He makes a vow. "I will not rise from this spot until I have found the answer." What happens next is told in stories layered with metaphor, but the core experience is universal. As Siddhartha sits in meditation, he encounters everything the mind uses to defend its illusions. First comes desire, visions of pleasure, of comfort, of the life he left behind. The mind whispers, "You could go back. You could have everything you gave up. Why suffer here in the dust?" He observes these thoughts without following them. Then comes fear. Visions of failure, of wasted years, of dying alone under this tree, having discovered nothing. The mind hisses, "You are not special. You will not succeed. Give up now before you humiliate yourself further." He observes these thoughts without believing them. Then comes the deepest challenge, doubt. The mind, in its final defense, questions the very project of awakening. Who are you to seek liberation? What makes you think there is anything to find? Perhaps suffering is simply the nature of existence, and this search is the ultimate delusion. He sits with doubt. He does not push it away. He does not argue with it. He simply watches. And as he watches, something shifts. The thoughts slow. The stories lose their power. He begins to see not the content of his mind, but the process, the way craving arises, the way it demands satisfaction, the way dissatisfaction inevitably follows, the way the cycle repeats endlessly. He sees how suffering is not imposed from outside, but generated from within by this very pattern of clinging and aversion. He sees how the self he has been defending, this I at the center of every experience, is not a solid, permanent entity, but a constantly changing process, a river mistaking itself for a stone. He sees the chain of causes that binds beings to suffering, ignorance leading to craving, craving leading to becoming, becoming leading to birth, birth leading to aging and death. And he sees how this chain can be broken, not by adding something, but by seeing clearly. As the night deepens, his awareness deepens. He moves through what will later be called the 3 watches of the night. In the first watch, he recalls his past lives, seeing the patterns that have repeated across countless incarnations. In the second watch, he perceives the operation of karma, how intentional actions shape future experience, how beings rise and fall through the realms of existence according to their deeds. In the third watch, he penetrates the Four Noble Truths, the core structure of reality itself. And then, as the morning star rises, he crosses a threshold from which there is no return. He awakens. The man who sat down beneath the tree is gone. What remains is not a person in the conventional sense, but a clear mirror, a space in which reality can be seen without distortion. He will spend the next 7 weeks sitting under and near that tree, integrating what he has discovered, marveling at its simplicity and profundity. Later, when asked what he was, he would not claim to be a god, a prophet, or a philosopher. He would say only, "I am awake," and the path he walked, he would teach, is open to anyone willing to walk it. For 7 weeks, the Buddha remains near the Bodhi tree. There is a story that in those first days he hesitates. What he has discovered is so subtle, so contrary to ordinary thinking, that he wonders whether it can be taught. Who would understand? Who would believe that liberation is possible through simply seeing clearly? But then he remembers his former teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. They came close. They would understand. He decides to find them and share what he has learned. He sets out, only to discover that both teachers have recently died. So he thinks of the 5 ascetics who left him in disgust when he broke his fast. They are sincere seekers. They have the discipline and dedication. Perhaps they will listen. He walks 200 kilometers to Sarnath, near the city of Varanasi, where the 5 are staying in a deer park. When they see him approaching, they make a pact. This man abandoned the path. We will not honor him. We will not rise to greet him. We will not treat him as a teacher. But as he comes closer, something in his presence breaks their resolve. One by one, they stand. They offer him a seat. They bring him water. Without words, they sense that something fundamental has changed. And then he speaks. What he offers them that day, in the shade of trees with deer grazing nearby, is the first formal teaching of what will become Buddhism. It is called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on turning the wheel of Dharma. He begins with the middle way, the insight that transformed his practice. The path to liberation, he explains, lies between the extremes of sensual indulgence and self-mortification. Both are dead ends. Both miss the point. Then he presents the 4 Noble Truths, the diagnostic framework that structures all of his teachings. There is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There is an end to suffering. There is a path that leads to the end of suffering. Simple, undeniable, practical. He does not ask them to believe in a deity or accept a dogma. He asks them to investigate their own experience and see whether what he says is true. By the end of the discourse, one of the 5, Kondanyina, attains the first stage of awakening. The others will follow soon after. They become the first members of the Sangha, the community of practitioners who will carry these teachings forward. But what exactly did the Buddha teach in that deer park? He taught that suffering is not a cosmic punishment or a random accident. It has a structure, a logic, a cause. And because it has a cause, it can be addressed. The path out of suffering is not magical or mystical. It is a practice, a training, a gradual transformation of how we see and how we act. This first turning of the wheel of Dharma is radical in its simplicity. It doesn't require you to become someone else. It requires you to see who you already are, and to see how suffering is perpetuated by misunderstanding that simple fact. The wheel has been set in motion. It will turn for 26 centuries and counting. If the Buddha's teaching can be distilled to a single framework, it is this: the Four Noble Truths. They are called noble, not because they are lofty or abstract, but because they are ennobling. To understand them is to step onto the path of liberation. They function like a physician's diagnosis: identify the disease, trace its cause, confirm that a cure exists, prescribe the treatment. Let's walk through them not as doctrine, but as invitations to look closely at your own life. The first noble truth, dukkha, there is suffering. The Pali word dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it means something broader. It includes pain, yes, but also dissatisfaction, unease, the subtle sense that something is always slightly off. Even in moments of happiness, there is a fragility, a knowledge that this too will pass. The Buddha is not being pessimistic, he is being precise. Think of your own experience. Even when things are going well, isn't there an undercurrent of anxiety? A worry about losing what you have, a hunger for what you don't have, a restlessness that no amount of acquisition seems to satisfy. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha. Being separated from what you love is dukkha. Being tied to what you hate is dukkha. Not getting what you want is dukkha. Even getting what you want is dukkha, because it doesn't last. This is not a judgment. It is an observation. The first noble truth asks only that you stop denying this basic fact of existence. The second noble truth, samudaya suffering, has a cause. The cause is tanha, craving, thirst, clinging, not desire itself, but the compulsive grasping that underlies it. The belief that if I can just get this one thing, I will finally be okay. The desperation to hold on to what is pleasant and push away what is unpleasant. Craving comes in three forms: craving for sensory pleasure, craving for existence, to be someone, to matter, to be recognized, craving for non-existence, to escape, to disappear, to stop feeling. All three create suffering because they are rooted in a misunderstanding, the belief that happiness can be found in controlling and manipulating experience. But experience is fluid. It changes. You can't hold on to the pleasant. You can't permanently avoid the unpleasant. And the self you are trying to satisfy is itself a process, not a fixed entity. Craving is like drinking salt water to quench thirst. It only increases the problem. The third noble truth, nirodha suffering, can end. This is the most hopeful truth and the most controversial. The Buddha is claiming that liberation is not just possible, it is the natural result of seeing clearly. When craving ceases, suffering ceases. Not because you have acquired something new, but because you have stopped doing the thing that generates suffering in the first place. Nirodha means cessation, but also freedom, peace, the unconditioned. It is the absence of compulsive reactivity. It is nirvana, though that word has been so distorted by popular culture that it's worth setting aside for now. What the Buddha is pointing to is simple. When you stop clinging, you stop suffering. Not because life becomes free of pain, but because pain is no longer compounded by resistance, fear, and the desperate need for things to be other than they are. The fourth noble truth, magga, there is a path. Liberation is not random. It is the result of practice, of training the mind and heart in specific ways. The path is called the Noble Eightfold Path, and it covers every dimension of life: how you see, how you think, how you speak, how you act, how you live, how you try, how you attend, how you meditate. It is not a ladder to climb, where you perfect one step before moving to the next. It is more like a web, where progress in one area supports progress in all the others. The fourth noble truth is an invitation. You don't have to suffer helplessly. There is something you can do. There is a way forward, and it starts not with belief, but with clear seeing. The Four Noble Truths are a map, but a map is useless unless you walk the territory. The path is not a dogma, it is a training, a set of practices that gradually reshape how you experience reality. The Buddha called it the middle way not only because it avoids extremes, but because it is balanced, integrated, touching every aspect of life. The Eightfold Path is divided into three categories: wisdom, ethics, and meditation. But these are not separate, they interpenetrate. Wisdom informs ethics. Ethics stabilizes meditation. Meditation deepens wisdom. Let's walk the path. Wisdom. Right view, seeing reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. This means understanding the Four Noble Truths, understanding impermanence, understanding that clinging leads to suffering. It is the foundation. Without clear seeing, the rest of the path is built on sand. Right intention, the direction of the heart. This includes the intention to renounce craving, to cultivate goodwill, and to live without harming. Intention precedes action. What you aim at shapes where you arrive. Ethics. Right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and usefully, avoiding lies, divisive talk, harsh words, and idle chatter. Speech is powerful. It can heal or harm. The Buddha asks you to be conscious of every word. Right action, acting in ways that do not harm. The basic precepts include not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct. These are not commandments from an external authority, but guidelines for living in a way that supports peace and clarity. Right livelihood, earning a living in a way that does not cause suffering to yourself or others. This means avoiding professions that trade in harm, weapons, poisons, slavery, deception. Your work shapes your mind. Choose carefully. Meditation. Right effort, cultivating wholesome mental states and releasing unwholesome ones. This involves four practices: preventing harmful states from arising, abandoning harmful states that have arisen, cultivating beneficial states, and maintaining beneficial states. It is not about suppression, but about wise guidance of attention. Right mindfulness, clear, continuous awareness of what is happening in body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. Mindfulness is the heart of the path. It is the practice of paying attention, moment by moment, without judgment. It reveals the patterns that bind you. Right concentration, the ability to focus the mind deeply and steadily. This is cultivated through meditation, particularly the practice of calming the mind and entering states of absorption called jhanas. Concentration provides the stability needed for insight to arise. The Eightfold Path is not about perfection. It is about direction. Each time you choose right speech over harsh words, each time you notice craving and choose not to follow it, each time you bring attention back to the present moment, you are walking the path. And the path, walked sincerely, leads to the end of suffering. Not someday, not in another life. Now, in this very experience, as you learn to see clearly and act wisely, there is a teaching that appears simple but runs deeper the more you examine it. The middle way. On the surface, it is a rejection of extremes. Not too tight, not too loose, not indulgence, not denial. A practical approach to spiritual life. But the middle way is more than moderation. It is a radical reorientation to how you meet reality. Most of us navigate life by oscillating between two poles. We chase pleasure and run from pain. We cling to what we like and push away what we don't. We want to be more of this and less of that. We live in a constant tug of war with experience, believing that if we can just arrange conditions perfectly, we will finally be at peace. But the middle way suggests something else entirely. What if the problem is not that you are on the wrong side of the polarity, but that you are trapped within the polarity itself? The Buddha's insight is that clinging and aversion are two sides of the same coin. Both arise from the belief that your well-being depends on controlling experience. Both create tension, reactivity, suffering. The middle way is the path that transcends the duality. It does not mean neutrality or apathy. It does not mean you stop having preferences or making choices. It means you stop giving those preferences ultimate power. You stop believing that your happiness depends on getting what you want and avoiding what you don't. You learn to meet reality on its own terms. When pleasure arises, you enjoy it without clinging to it. When pain arises, you endure it without being destroyed by it. When something pleasant ends, you let it go. When something unpleasant appears, you do not collapse into despair. This is not detachment in the sense of coldness or disengagement. It is freedom, the ability to remain centered, responsive, awake, regardless of conditions. The middle way applies to every dimension of the path. In practice, it means not forcing your meditation, but also not drifting into distraction. In ethics, it means not rigidly following rules, but also not abandoning discipline. In life, it means not clinging to comfort, but also not glorifying suffering. It is the art of balance, the wisdom of non-extremity, and it asks something difficult, that you give up the fantasy of control. Because here is the truth the middle way reveals: control is an illusion. You cannot make reality conform to your wishes. You cannot hold on to what is changing. You cannot avoid the unpleasant forever, but you can change your relationship to all of it. You can stop fighting. You can stop clinging. You can learn to walk through life with an open hand, meeting each moment as it is, not as you demand it to be. This is the middle way, not a compromise, a liberation. The Buddha offers three characteristics that mark all conditioned phenomena. Three truths so fundamental that to see them clearly is to shift the very ground of your existence. They are called the three marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Anicca, impermanence. Everything changes, not just eventually, constantly. Every moment the world is in flux. Your body is not the same as it was a year ago, a day ago, an hour ago. Your thoughts arise and dissolve. Your emotions come and go. The people you love are aging. The things you own are decaying. Nothing lasts. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is the raw texture of reality, if you look closely enough. Most of us know intellectually that things change, but we don't live as if we know it. We treat the impermanent as permanent. We cling to relationships as if they won't end. We build plans as if the future is guaranteed. We accumulate possessions as if they will satisfy us forever. And when change comes, as it always does, we are shocked, devastated, betrayed. But impermanence is not betrayal. It is simply the nature of things. The Buddha is not asking you to resign yourself to loss. He is asking you to see that clinging to what is changing is the source of your suffering. When you stop pretending that anything is permanent, you can finally meet life as it actually is. And strangely, this does not lead to despair. It leads to freedom, because when you stop demanding that things last forever, you can appreciate them while they're here. Dukkha, suffering. We have already explored this. But the second mark adds a nuance. Suffering is not just an unfortunate feature of life. It is woven into the fabric of conditioned existence. Because everything is impermanent, everything is unsatisfactory, you cannot find lasting peace in anything that changes. Even pleasure, when clung to, becomes a source of suffering. This is not pessimism, it is clear-eyed realism. The Buddha is saying, stop looking for ultimate satisfaction in the conditioned. It's not there. It has never been there. It will never be there. As long as you are chasing impermanent things and expecting them to deliver permanent happiness, you will suffer. But there is unconditioned peace. There is liberation. And it is found not by acquiring more, but by seeing through the game. Anatta, non-self. This is the most challenging teaching, the one that strikes at the heart of your most basic assumptions. You believe you are a self, a solid, continuous, independent entity that exists behind your thoughts, inhabiting your body, making your decisions. The Buddha says, look more closely. Where is this self? Is it your body? But your body is constantly changing. Is it your thoughts? But thoughts come and go. You don't control them. Is it your feelings? But feelings arise and dissolve without your permission. What you call I is a process, not a thing. It is a flow of sensations, perceptions, thoughts, intentions, and consciousness, all interdependent, all impermanent. There is no unchanging essence at the center, and when you see this clearly, not as an idea, but as a direct perception, something astonishing happens. The suffering that arises from defending, promoting, and clinging to a self dissolves. You stop taking everything personally. You stop being so fragile, so reactive, so obsessed with being right, being recognized, being secure. You relax into the flow of experience without needing to control it. This is not nihilism. You don't disappear. Life continues. But it is no longer organized around the desperate project of maintaining an illusion. You become lighter, freer, more fully alive. The three marks are not beliefs to adopt. They are realities to investigate. Look at your own experience. Is anything truly permanent? Does clinging ever lead to lasting peace? Can you find a solid, unchanging self? The Buddha's invitation is simple. See for yourself. There is a teaching the Buddha called the deepest of his discoveries, dependent origination paticca samuppada. It is the map of how suffering arises and how it can cease. It is the mechanics of existence itself, the chain of causation that binds beings to the cycle of birth and death. It is complex, and it is worth walking slowly. The teaching unfolds in 12 links, each one conditioning the next. Because of ignorance, there are volitional formations, the habitual patterns of mind that shape experience. Because of volitional formations, there is consciousness, the arising of awareness, moment by moment. Because of consciousness, there is name and form, the mind-body complex, the self that seems to exist. Because of name and form, there are the 6 sense bases, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Because of the 6 sense bases, there is contact, the meeting of sense, organ, object, and consciousness. Because of contact, there is feeling pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Because of feeling, there is craving, the impulse to grasp what is pleasant, push away what is unpleasant, and ignore what is neutral. Because of craving, there is clinging attachment to views, desires, rituals, the notion of self. Because of clinging, there is becoming, the process of forming a future, of being reborn into new states of existence. Because of becoming, there is birth, not just literal birth, but the continual arising of the sense of self in each moment. Because of birth, there is aging and death, and with them, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. This is the chain. Link by link, it describes how ignorance, the failure to see things as they are, sets in motion a cascade of suffering. But here is the extraordinary part. Because the chain is causal, it can be interrupted. When ignorance ceases, volitional formations cease. When volitional formations cease, consciousness ceases to be conditioned by them, and so on, link by link, until the entire structure of suffering unravels. This is not about escaping life. It is about escaping the misunderstanding that drives suffering. The Buddha is showing you that suffering is not arbitrary. It arises from conditions, and when those conditions are removed, suffering naturally ceases. The key link, the hinge on which everything turns, is craving. If you can see craving as it arises before it becomes clinging, before it becomes becoming, you can interrupt the chain. You don't have to follow the impulse. You can simply observe it, understand it, and let it pass. This is the practice. Not suppressing desire, but seeing it clearly. Not denying the body or the mind, but understanding the patterns that turn experience into suffering. Dependent origination is the Buddha's most profound teaching on causality. It says, you are not a victim of fate. You are not being punished. You are caught in a process, and that process can be understood. And once understood, it can be undone. The Buddha did not speculate about metaphysics. He did not argue about whether the soul exists or whether the universe is eternal. When pressed on such questions, he remained silent or redirected the conversation. Why? Because these questions do not lead to liberation. They are distractions, intellectual games that keep you from the real work. What he did teach, in meticulous detail, is the nature of mind and consciousness, because it is here in the mind that suffering arises, and it is here that it can end. Consciousness, in the Buddha's framework, is not a thing. It is an event. It arises in dependence on conditions, a sense organ, a sense object, and the meeting of the two. See a tree, and visual consciousness arises. Hear a sound, and auditory consciousness arises. Think a thought, and mental consciousness arises. There is no permanent observer standing apart from experience. There is only the flow of knowing, moment by moment, conditioned by what comes before and conditioning what comes after. The mind is divided into different aspects, but they are all part of a single process. There is feeling, the bare quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that colors every experience. There is perception, the recognition and labeling of what is experienced. There is mental formations, the volitions, intentions, and habits that shape how you respond. And there is consciousness, the knowing itself. These five aggregates form feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are what you call self. But as we have seen, none of them is permanent, none is autonomous, and none is truly yours. They are processes, not possessions. The Buddha describes the mind as like a river. It appears continuous, but it is actually a series of moments arising and passing away so quickly that it seems solid. Each moment of consciousness is born from conditions, exists briefly, and dissolves, giving rise to the next moment. This is crucial. The mind is not your enemy. Many spiritual traditions treat the mind as something to be conquered, suppressed, or transcended. But the Buddha takes a different approach. The mind is simply misunderstood. When you believe your thoughts are truth, when you identify with your emotions, when you take the mind's stories about reality as reality itself, that is when suffering arises. But the mind, seen clearly, is just a natural process. Thoughts arise because conditions give rise to them. They are not commands, they are not facts. They are events in consciousness, no more substantial than clouds passing through sky. The practice is to become intimate with this process, to sit quietly and watch thoughts arise, to notice how a pleasant feeling triggers a desire, to see how an unpleasant feeling triggers aversion, to observe the mind's constant commentary, its judgments, its narratives, its fears. And in that watching, something loosens. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear. And that awareness is vast, spacious, undisturbed by the content that moves through it. The Buddha speaks of different qualities of mind, skillful and unskillful, wholesome and unwholesome. Greed, hatred, and delusion are the three poisons that cloud consciousness and generate suffering. Generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom are their antidotes. But even these categories are not absolute. They are descriptive, pragmatic. The question is always, does this mental state lead toward freedom or toward bondage? The training of the mind is gradual. First, you learn to recognize mental states as they arise. This is mindfulness, the simple act of knowing what is happening while it is happening. Then you learn to see the patterns, how anger always begins with a small irritation, how anxiety always spins the same stories, how desire always promises satisfaction it cannot deliver. Then you learn to choose, not to suppress or deny what arises, but to meet it with wisdom rather than reactivity, to see craving and not follow it, to see aversion and not act from it, to see delusion and not believe it. And finally, you learn to rest in awareness itself, clear, open, undisturbed. This is the natural state of mind the Buddha teaches. Not a state you achieve, but a state you uncover by removing the layers of confusion and reactivity that obscure it. Consciousness, when not caught in craving, is luminous. It is this luminosity the path reveals. The word karma has been so misused that it's worth starting from scratch. Karma in the Buddha's teaching is not fate. It is not cosmic punishment or reward. It is not a divine accounting system that tallies your good deeds and bad deeds and issues a final judgment. Karma simply means action. More specifically, it means intentional action, the choices you make with body, speech, and mind, and the consequences that flow from those choices. The Buddha is teaching causality on a moral and psychological level. If you act with greed, hatred, or delusion, you create conditions for suffering, not because a God is punishing you, but because those actions shape your mind, your relationships, and your future experiences. If you act with generosity, kindness, and wisdom, you create conditions for peace and happiness. This is not abstract philosophy. It is observable. Notice what happens after you lie. There is a tightness, a defensiveness, a need to maintain the lie. The mind becomes contracted. Notice what happens after an act of genuine kindness. There is a lightness, an openness, a sense of alignment. The mind becomes spacious. Karma is the law of cause and effect in the realm of intention. But the Buddha goes further. He speaks of rebirth. This is where many modern readers stumble. Rebirth seems like a relic of ancient Indian cosmology, something metaphorical at best, superstitious at worst. But consider what the Buddha is pointing to. Even if you set aside the question of literal rebirth across lifetimes, rebirth happens moment by moment. Every action plants a seed. Every intention shapes the next moment of consciousness. You are constantly becoming, constantly being reborn into new states of being based on the patterns you reinforce. If you spend your day lost in anger, you are reborn as an angry person again and again moment by moment. If you spend your day cultivating kindness, you are reborn as someone whose default state is kindness. This is rebirth in the immediate, undeniable sense. Whether there is also rebirth across lifetimes, whether consciousness continues in some form after death, the Buddha treats as less important than understanding the process right now. The point is not to secure a better afterlife. The point is to end the cycle of suffering here, in this life, in this moment. The mechanics of karma and rebirth operate through the 12 links of dependent origination. Ignorance leads to volitional formations, which condition consciousness, which gives rise to name and form, which perpetuates the cycle. As long as craving and clinging remain, as long as there is the sense of a self that must be satisfied, protected, and perpetuated, the cycle continues. But when craving ceases, when clinging is released, when the illusion of self is seen through, the cycle stops. This is what it means to be free of rebirth. Not that you cease to exist, but that you cease to be driven by the compulsive patterns that create suffering. The Buddha is uninterested in speculation about what happens after that. He is interested in the path that leads to liberation now. Karma is not destiny, it is possibility. Every moment is a new choice. Every action is a chance to reinforce old patterns or create new ones. The past has shaped you, but it does not own you. You are not condemned by your history. You are empowered by your next choice. Now we come to the heart of the practice. Everything the Buddha taught points toward one thing: direct experience. Not belief, not doctrine, not ritual, but the simple, radical act of paying attention to what is actually happening. This is meditation. This is mindfulness. The Pali word for mindfulness is sati, which means to remember, to recollect, to be aware. It is the capacity to keep your attention on what is present, rather than being lost in distraction, fantasy, or worry. Mindfulness is not a mystical state. It is not bliss or transcendence or emptiness. It is simply knowing what is happening while it is happening. When you are eating, knowing you are eating. When you are walking, knowing you are walking. When you are angry, knowing you are angry. When you are lost in thought, knowing you are lost in thought. It sounds trivial. It is transformative, because most of the time you are not present. You are replaying the past or rehearsing the future. You are judging, narrating, resisting, grasping. You are everywhere except here. And in that absence, suffering flourishes. The Buddha taught many forms of meditation, but they can be grouped into two broad categories: calming and insight. Samatha, calming meditation. This is the practice of focusing the mind on a single object, the breath, a phrase, a visual point, until the mind becomes stable, unified, tranquil. When the mind is scattered, it is weak. When it is concentrated, it is powerful. Concentration is not an end in itself, but it is the foundation for insight. The Buddha describes levels of concentration called jhanas, states of deep absorption, where the usual noise of the mind falls away, and you rest in profound stillness and clarity. But even a few moments of focused attention have value. They show you what it feels like when the mind is not pulled in 10 directions. They give you a taste of peace that does not depend on external conditions. Vipassana, insight meditation. This is the practice of observing experience closely, seeing its true nature, impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. You sit and watch sensations arise in the body. You watch thoughts arise in the mind. You watch emotions come and go. You do not interfere. You do not judge. You simply observe. And in that observation, patterns become clear. You see how craving arises the instant something pleasant appears. You see how aversion arises the instant something unpleasant appears. You see how the mind creates stories about every sensation, every thought, turning simple experience into complex drama. You see the chain of dependent origination unfolding in real time. And when you see it clearly enough, you stop feeding it, not by force, but by understanding. The craving loses its grip, the clinging dissolves, the sense of self becomes transparent. This is how insight liberates. The four foundations of mindfulness. The Buddha offers a systematic approach in the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness. First, mindfulness of the body. Feel the breath moving in and out. Feel the sensations of sitting, standing, walking. Feel the weight, the temperature, the texture of physical experience. The body is the anchor to the present moment. Second, mindfulness of feelings. Notice the quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that colors every experience. See how you react to that quality, grasping at the pleasant, pushing away the unpleasant, ignoring the neutral. This is where craving is born. Third, mindfulness of mind. Observe the state of consciousness itself. Is it calm or agitated, focused or scattered, clear or clouded? Knowing the mind state changes the mind state. Fourth, mindfulness of mental objects. Observe thoughts, beliefs, perceptions. See the five hindrances: desire, aversion, sloth, restlessness, doubt when they arise. See the seven factors of awakening mindfulness: investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, equanimity. When they arise, these four foundations cover the entirety of experience. When you bring mindfulness to any of them, you begin to see through the illusion that binds you. Meditation is not an escape from life. It is an entry into life, into the raw, unfiltered, immediate reality of existence. And what you find there is not what you expected. You find that peace was always available. You find that freedom is not somewhere else. You find that you were never actually trapped. You only believed you were. The practice is simple. Sit, breathe, watch. Let everything be as it is, and in that allowing, discover what has always been true. The Buddha's teaching is not cold or detached. At its heart is a profound ethic of care. The path to liberation is not solitary in the sense of being selfish. It is not about achieving your own peace at the expense of others. In fact, genuine freedom naturally overflows into compassion. Why? Because when you see through the illusion of a separate self, you also see through the illusion of separation itself. The boundaries you thought were so solid between you and others, between your suffering and their suffering, begin to dissolve. You recognize that the same patterns of craving, aversion, and confusion operate in every human heart. You are not fundamentally different from anyone else, and from that recognition, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral obligation, but as a spontaneous expression of understanding. The Buddha taught four qualities called the Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes. Metta, loving kindness. This is the wish for all beings to be happy, to be well, to be free from suffering. It is not sentimental, it is not conditional, it does not depend on whether someone deserves it. Loving kindness is the natural warmth of a heart that is not defending itself. The practice begins with yourself. May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease. Many people struggle here. They find it easier to wish well for others than for themselves. But the Buddha is clear. If you cannot meet yourself with kindness, your compassion for others will be shallow, strained, or rooted in obligation rather than genuine care. Then you extend it outward to loved ones, to neutral people, to difficult people, to all beings everywhere. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. The practice is not about generating a feeling. It is about cultivating an intention, a direction of the heart. And over time, that intention reshapes how you move through the world. Karuna, compassion. This is the wish for beings to be free from suffering. It arises when you encounter pain, your own or another's, and instead of turning away, you turn toward it with the intention to help. Compassion is not pity. Pity looks down. Compassion meets suffering at eye level, recognizing our shared vulnerability. The practice is to open to suffering without being overwhelmed by it, to see clearly without collapsing into despair, to act skillfully without burning out. This requires wisdom. Compassion without wisdom can become enabling, codependent, or self-destructive, but wisdom without compassion is cold, sterile, incomplete. Mudita, sympathetic joy. This is the ability to rejoice in the happiness and success of others. It is the antidote to envy, resentment, and the scarcity mindset that says if someone else wins, you lose. Mudita recognizes that joy is not a limited resource. Another person's happiness does not diminish yours. In fact, when you can genuinely celebrate others, you multiply the amount of joy available in your own experience. This is harder than it sounds. The mind has a tendency to compare, to measure, to feel threatened by others' good fortune. But the practice of mudita trains you to meet success, yours and others, with delight rather than jealousy. Upekkha, equanimity. This is balance, the ability to remain steady in the face of life's inevitable ups and downs. Equanimity is not indifference. It is not detachment in the sense of not caring. It is the deep peace that comes from understanding that you cannot control outcomes, that everyone is the heir of their own karma, that some things are beyond your power to fix. It is the serenity to accept what cannot be changed, while still engaging fully with what can be. The four Brahmaviharas work together. Loving kindness opens the heart. Compassion responds to suffering. Sympathetic joy celebrates what is good. Equanimity keeps you balanced. Together, they create a way of being in the world that is warm, engaged, responsive, and free. This is not separate from wisdom. It is wisdom in action. Because once you see clearly, once you understand the nature of suffering and the possibility of freedom, how could you not wish that freedom for everyone? The Buddha's final words to his disciples were simple: work out your own liberation with diligence. But he also said, let your love flow outward through the universe to its height, its depth, its broad extent, without limit, without hatred, without enmity. These are not contradictory. They are two expressions of the same truth. There is a teaching that can sound nihilistic if misunderstood, but is actually the most liberating insight in the entire tradition. Emptiness, sunyata, not the emptiness of absence or void, but the emptiness of inherent existence. Nothing exists independently, on its own, separate from everything else. Every phenomenon, every object, every being, every experience arises in dependence on conditions. Change the conditions, and the phenomenon changes or ceases to exist. Take a simple example: a table. The table depends on wood, which depends on a tree, which depends on soil, sunlight, water, and countless other factors. It depends on the carpenter who shaped it, who depends on their parents, their training, their tools. It depends on your perception without consciousness to recognize it as table. It is just wood arranged in a certain pattern. Where exactly is the table's inherent tableness? It's not in the wood. Wood can be many things. It's not in the shape. Rearrange the pieces, and the table ceases. It's not in your mind. The table exists when you're not looking at it. The table is a designation, a concept, a convenience. It is empty of independent existence. This is true of everything, including you. The teaching of non-self anatta is the application of emptiness to the person. You are not a solid, unchanging entity. You are a process, a flow of causes and conditions, a temporary arrangement of matter and consciousness that arises, exists for a while, and dissolves. The body is not self. It is made of food, water, air, countless cells arising and dying. The feelings are not self. They come and go based on conditions, the perceptions, the mental formations, the consciousness. None of these is self. They are all conditioned, impermanent, dependently arisen. So where is the self? The answer is not that you don't exist. You clearly exist in a conventional sense. You have experiences, make choices, walk through the world, but you do not exist in the way you think you do, as a permanent, independent, essential I at the center of experience. This is the great reversal. Most spiritual traditions promise to give you something, a soul, an eternal self, union with God. The Buddha takes away the one thing you thought you had, and in that taking away, he gives you everything. Because when you see through the illusion of self, the burden of self drops away. You no longer have to defend this fragile construction. You no longer have to constantly promote yourself, protect yourself, worry about whether you are enough, whether you matter, whether you will be remembered. The exhausting project of being someone collapses, and what's left is just this life flowing, experience arising, awareness present, without the overlay of self-concern. Emptiness does not mean nothing matters. It means nothing is solid in the way you thought, and that is profoundly freeing. When you understand emptiness, you stop grasping, not because you force yourself to let go, but because there is nothing to hold on to. Everything is already flowing. You were never separate from that flow. The practice is to see this not as an idea, but as a direct perception. Sit in meditation and try to find the self. Look for the thinker behind the thoughts, the feeler behind the feelings, the observer behind the experience. You won't find it. What you'll find is a flow, thoughts arising from nowhere, returning to nowhere, sensations appearing and disappearing, consciousness flickering moment by moment. And in that seeing, the grip loosens. You become lighter, less defended, more open. This is what the Buddha means by liberation. Not escape from the world, but freedom within it. Not the destruction of the self, but the recognition that there never was a solid self to destroy. Just this, just now, just awareness, appearing as everything. The Buddha did not envision a path walked alone. From the beginning, he emphasized the importance of the Sangha, the community of practitioners. After his enlightenment, he gathered disciples. After his first teaching, he ordained monks. Throughout his life, he cultivated a network of lay people and monastics who supported each other in the practice. Why? Because the path is difficult, the mind's habits are deep, the pull of craving is strong, the illusions are convincing. To walk this path without support, without guidance, without companions who share your aspiration, is to make the journey unnecessarily hard. The Sangha serves multiple functions. It provides teachers who have walked further along the path and can guide you through obstacles. It provides friends who share your commitment and can reflect back your blind spots. It provides a container, a culture, a set of shared values that make ethical living easier. In the Buddha's time, the Sangha was divided into 4 groups: monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. Each had different levels of commitment and different sets of precepts, but all were part of the same community, all were walking the same path. The ethical discipline Sila is the foundation. For monks and nuns, this meant hundreds of training rules governing every aspect of life, designed to minimize harm and maximize conditions for awakening. For lay people, the 5 precepts form the basic ethical framework. Refrain from killing, refrain from stealing, refrain from sexual misconduct, refrain from lying, refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. These are not commandments handed down from a deity. They are training guidelines, practical recommendations for living in a way that reduces suffering and supports clarity. Notice the phrasing, refrain from. Not thou shalt not, but an invitation to practice restraint, to notice the impulse to harm and choose differently. Why are these important? Because actions have consequences. When you lie, you create a world where trust is fragile. When you steal, you create a world where safety is compromised. When you kill, you create a world where life is cheap. And more immediately, when you violate these precepts, your mind knows. There is guilt, defensiveness, a subtle sense of being out of alignment. This disturbance makes meditation harder, makes clear seeing harder, makes peace harder. Sila is not about morality in the abstract. It is about creating internal and external conditions that support awakening. The Buddha was pragmatic. He understood that you cannot meditate your way out of an unethical life. If you are lying, stealing, harming, no amount of sitting on a cushion will bring you peace. The mind will be agitated at its root. But when you live with integrity, when your actions align with your values, when you are not constantly managing a web of deception or defending against guilt, the mind becomes naturally calmer, concentration deepens, insight arises more easily. The Sangha helps you stay accountable. It's easy to rationalize, to make exceptions, to convince yourself that this one time doesn't count. But when you are part of a community, when others are watching, not to judge but to support, when you have made commitments publicly, it becomes harder to drift. And beyond ethics, the Sangha provides something harder to quantify, a sense of belonging on the path. The world does not generally support awakening. It supports distraction, consumption, busyness, the constant pursuit of more. To step out of that, to say, I want something different, I want freedom, can feel lonely, countercultural, strange, but in the Sangha, you find others who have made the same choice, and that makes all the difference. The Buddha spoke of 3 treasures, 3 refuges, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha, the possibility of awakening, the Dharma, the teaching, the path, the Sangha, the community that holds and transmits it. You cannot walk this path without all 3, and you don't have to. We come now to the culmination, nirvana. The word has been so romanticized, so distorted, so commercialized that it's almost useless. It conjures images of blissful oblivion, of nothingness, of escape. But the Buddha's use of the term is far more precise. Nirvana literally means extinguishing or blowing out like a candle flame. What is extinguished? Not you, not life, but the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. The compulsive craving that keeps the cycle of suffering in motion. When those fires go out, what remains? The Buddha is famously reluctant to describe it in positive terms. He will say what nirvana is not. It is not suffering, not impermanent, not conditioned, not dependent on anything. But what it is, he mostly leaves in silence. Why? Because language operates within the framework of conventional reality. Nirvana is the unconditioned, the dimension beyond concepts. To describe it in words is to inevitably distort it, but he does offer hints. Nirvana is peace. It is freedom. It is the end of becoming, the end of birth and death, the end of the relentless craving that drives existence. It is a state or non-state of complete liberation, where there is no more clinging, no more identification, no more suffering, and crucially, it can be realized in this life. The Buddha and his awakened disciples were living examples. They did not disappear into some transcendent realm. They walked, ate, taught, laughed, felt pain when sick, felt joy in friendship. But they were free. The underlying structure of suffering had been dismantled. There are two aspects of nirvana in the tradition. Nirvana with remainder, the liberation achieved while still alive. The fires are out, but the body and mind continue. This is what the Buddha experienced under the Bodhi tree and lived for 45 years afterward. Nirvana without remainder, the final passing away, when the body dies and there is no more rebirth, no more conditioned existence. But the emphasis always is on the first, because that is what is available now. That is what the path leads to. How do you know if someone has attained nirvana? The Buddha describes several stages of awakening. Dream enterer, the first stage. You have seen the Dharma clearly enough that you will never again fall into complete delusion. The worst forms of suffering are cut off. You are guaranteed to reach full liberation within 7 lifetimes at most, and usually much sooner. Once returner, the second stage. Greed, hatred, and delusion are greatly weakened. You will be reborn at most one more time. Non-returner, the third stage. Sensory desire and ill will are completely eradicated. You will not return to human existence, but will reach full awakening in a celestial realm. Arahant, the fourth stage. Full liberation. All fetters are broken. Greed, hatred, and delusion are gone. Nirvana is realized. These stages are not achievements to boast about. They are simply descriptions of where you are on the path, milestones of how thoroughly you have seen through the illusions. What is clear is that liberation is not all or nothing. It unfolds in stages. Each stage brings more freedom, more peace, less suffering, and the path is open. The Buddha insists on this again and again. He is not special in the sense of being fundamentally different from you. He is human. What he discovered, you can discover. What he achieved, you can achieve. The conditions are the same. A human life, a mind, the willingness to look clearly. Nirvana is not a place you go. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is the natural result of seeing things as they are and releasing the patterns that create suffering. It is here. It is now. It is closer than you think, not because you must travel a great distance, but because you must stop traveling and see where you already are. The fires are burning because you are feeding them. Stop feeding them, and they go out. What remains? Something the Buddha called the deathless, the unborn, the unconditioned. Not nothing, not something, just this, without the overlay of suffering. Peace beyond understanding, freedom beyond words. The path leads there. The question is, will you walk it? The Buddha died at the age of 80. He had been teaching for 45 years, walking the roads of northern India, speaking to anyone who would listen, kings and beggars, scholars and laborers, men and women, young and old. In his final months, he grew ill. He knew death was approaching. His disciples were distraught. What would they do without him? Who would guide them? His response was both tender and firm. Be a lamp unto yourself. He did not say, worship me. He did not say, build temples to my memory. He said, "Take refuge in the Dharma, practice the teachings, investigate your own experience. No one can liberate you but yourself." He died in a grove of trees, lying on his side between two sal trees in full bloom, surrounded by his closest disciples. His final words: "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence." And then he was gone. But the teaching lived on. The Sangha he had built did not collapse. His disciples carried the Dharma forward, memorizing his words, establishing monastic communities, training new generations of practitioners. Within a few centuries, Buddhism had spread across Asia, to Sri Lanka, to Burma, to Thailand, to China, to Japan, to Tibet. It adapted to each culture, taking on new forms, new languages, new expressions, but always maintaining the core, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the possibility of liberation. In some places, it became a monastic tradition, focused on meditation and renunciation. In others, it became a popular religion with rituals, devotional practices, and cosmologies. In others, it integrated with local philosophies, creating new hybrid forms. But through all these transformations, the essence remained. Suffering exists, it has a cause, it can end, there is a path. Today, 26 centuries after the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, his teachings continue to spread. They have reached the West, where they are being translated not only linguistically but culturally, meeting psychology, neuroscience, secular mindfulness movements. And in this translation, something interesting is happening. The teachings are being stripped of cultural accretion, tested empirically, applied pragmatically. What remains is remarkably consistent with what the Buddha originally taught. Pay attention, see clearly, act wisely, cultivate compassion. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Buddha observed. The self is not what it seems. Consciousness is a process, not a thing. Attention can be trained. Meditation changes the brain. Modern psychology confirms. Rumination increases suffering. Experiential avoidance perpetuates anxiety. Mindfulness reduces stress, depression, chronic pain. The Buddha was not a mystic speaking in riddles. He was an empiricist, mapping the territory of mind and suffering with the precision of a scientist and the compassion of a healer. His legacy is not a religion to believe in. It is a path to walk, and the path is as relevant now as it was in the 6th century BCE, because human suffering has not changed. The forms shift. We worry about different things, we use different technologies, we speak different languages, but the underlying pattern is identical. We crave what we don't have. We cling to what we do have. We resist what is unpleasant. We fear impermanence. We defend a self that does not exist in the way we think it does. And in that craving, clinging, resisting, fearing, defending, we suffer. The Buddha's gift is the recognition that this is not inevitable. You are not doomed to suffer. You are not broken. You are not being punished. You are simply caught in a pattern, and that pattern can be seen, understood, and released. The teachings are not asking you to become someone else. They are asking you to see who you already are, beneath the stories, the fears, the endless becoming. And when you see clearly, you discover something extraordinary. You were always free. You just didn't know it. As you rest tonight, let these teachings settle, not as beliefs to adopt, but as questions to investigate. Is there suffering in your life? Look closely. Where is it? What causes it? What are you clinging to? What are you resisting? Can you imagine what it would be like if that suffering ceased? Not because your circumstances changed, but because you changed your relationship to them. Is there a path? Can you, in small ways, begin to see more clearly, act more wisely, cultivate more compassion? The Buddha's teaching is not about perfection. It is about direction. Every moment of mindfulness, every act of kindness, every time you choose not to follow craving or aversion, you are walking the path. And the path, walked with sincerity, leads where it has always led, to peace, to freedom, to awakening. The Buddha sat under a tree and saw the nature of existence. You don't need to sit under that tree. You don't need to become a monk or memorize scriptures or adopt a new identity. You only need to look clearly at your own life, at this moment, right now. And in that clear seeing, everything changes. The wheel of Dharma has been turning for 26 centuries. It turns still, and it turns in you. Sleep well, and when you wake, remember, you are not separate from this teaching. You are the teaching, coming to know itself. This is the Buddha's eternal legacy, not a set of doctrines to preserve, but a living transmission of wisdom that passes from heart to heart, from moment to moment, from suffering into freedom. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings awaken.